Well, welcome everyone to Vibrant Fusion's April 26th webcast showcasing a day in the life of a PMO. My name is Victoria and I'm going to start this webcast on how to keep your PMO running as efficiently as possible. So if at any time during the webcast you have a question, please write them in the messaging section, and if time allows, we'll do our best to address them at the end. This webcast is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out together with a survey later today. We appreciate any responses as they really do guide the content and services we provide. So I think we can get our slideshow started. So I'm going to cover quickly the introductions, a little bit about Vibrant Fusion and Wickersoft, and then Erin, our lovely architect, will take us through the demonstration as well as answer any questions that you might have. So Harry Little is the account executive for the Midwest region. He is also on this call, as well as Erin, who is our senior solutions architect for the US region, who focuses on Microsoft Project as well as SharePoint. So, quick little poll. You can write in the chat function, or feel free to unmute yourself. How many of you are project managers, resource managers, executives, PMOs? Okay, so Mike's a PMO team member. Good to know. Oh, great. Getting a couple of responses here. Okay, so a lot of PMOs members here. Great. Portfolio managers, project managers, great. Well, that's kind of what we specialize here with Wickersoft and Vibrant Fusion. So Vibrant Fusion is a full-service project management solution provider. As a Microsoft Gold partner for project and portfolio management, we provide PMO and project server-related consulting and staffing services, emphasizing implementation, migration, and staffing. Our specialty project, Quick PMO, is a built-on solution for Microsoft Project that helps organizations get started really quickly with project, as well as helps them at every step along the way. So Vibrant Fusion was acquired by Wickersoft, which is a Microsoft joint venture that offers consulting and support services with Power BI, as well as managed services and staff augmentation. They have a larger global footprint, which allows us to provide a larger variety of solutions, as well as local implementation throughout the US and beyond. So at this point, I think I'd like to hand it over to Erin, who can take you through the rest of the webcast.
Okay, great. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you, Erin.
Can you hear me okay?
Sound great.
All right, fantastic, fantastic. So, quick agenda. The greater part of the next 90 minutes is going to be a technical demo running you through sort of soup to nuts capabilities within the Microsoft PPM platform known as Project Online. So it's part of their Office 365 suite of applications. It's their project and portfolio management offering within that. So run you through some areas such as ideation, project onboarding, demand management, project management, project schedule management, resource management, BI and reporting, so getting valuable insights back out of the tool. And I have a slide kind of describing each of those areas, but most of the time is going to be a live demo. So as Victoria mentioned, we are a full-service PPM service provider. Some of our offerings you'll see in the slide deck as it's distributed to you later, but we do have a couple things that are relatively new within our portfolio. One of them that we do offer is a PMO strategy service. Those help us provide direction, guidance, and strategies to help you guys either establish your PMO if it's sort of newly being formed, or to help you better formalize it, improve processes, things like that. So it's typically a 2-week workshop engagement, 1 week where we are either on site or in webinar meetings with you guys doing things like figuring out your objectives, your metrics, stuff like that, and then we turn around and deliver a roadmap and implementation plan documents to you guys. Also, not specifically technology related, but when you implement something like Office 365 or Project Online or SharePoint Online, or any application that you're not using currently to do something such as manage your portfolio, manage your projects, that can be seen as a disruptive technology. Hopefully, it's seen more as a transformational technology, but nonetheless, adoption is pretty key. So we do have lots of experience rolling out project management solutions, not just Project Online, but also Project Server, MS Project. So we can help you with things like communication strategy, training plan, and user adoption. So to make sure that when you do implement something as transformational as Project Online, you get good high adoption on it, and you're really achieving the value that you're seeking from the platform. So that's also a workshop-based professional services offering, similar to our PMO strategy services. Little slide here on some of our customers. Would certainly love to add any of your organizations to this list as well. But without further ado, let me go over the technical agenda and what we're planning in terms of the demo here. So we'll talk about some effective practices for ideation, project onboarding, and demand management within Project Online. So how can you do demand management within Project Online? So once you've loaded projects and you have in-flight projects as well as proposals or project ideas, how do you evaluate your resource pool, your portfolio budget, things like that, to determine which projects are really moving us towards the goal line? Which projects are winning projects, which ones are candidates maybe for being placed on hold or canceled. And when we are evaluating proposals, which of those proposals, should we decide to do them, are we able to do based on the bandwidth that we have within our resource pool? So we're going to take a look at that. From there, we'll take a look at some different dashboards and different ways that you can examine your portfolio of projects and perhaps uncover any underperforming projects that you might have and figure out ways you can get them back on track. Okay. Part of that will also be taking a look at things like project budget. So if you need to build a budget for your project, kind of top down, or if you need to do it, bottom up, we'll take a look at different approaches to do that, both within MS Project and within some other tools that you have at your disposal. And then we'll also cover the ways that you can manage various skill sets within a resource pool. So this is not necessarily the order of all the demos that are happening here, but these are the topic areas that you're going to see throughout the course of this demo. So I'll try to make it pretty obvious, or I'll literally say when I'm sort of switching hats between, say, a project manager and a resource manager, or a project manager and a program or portfolio owner, when I'm demoing the various features within Project Online. Okay, so without further ado, the first demo portion that we have is I'm going to give you a brief overview of the environment itself, and then we're going to talk about some strategic, pragmatic ways that you can handle ideation, project onboarding, and demand management. So let me bring my demo environment screen over. And what you're looking at here, if you guys have not been exposed to Project Online, so again, Project Online is Microsoft's PPM, Project Portfolio Management service offering. That's part of Office 365, so you'll notice the Office 365 band up here. So, in addition to Project Online, I have access to, any of the other Office 365 applications that my current subscription is licensed for. So you have a nice tight integration between Project Online and SharePoint, Exchange email, et cetera, et cetera. There is an on-premises version of this as well, so anything that you're seeing me demo today in Project Online, if you're not an Office 365 customer and you still have a preference for deploying applications within your own data center, the on-premises equivalent of Project Online is known as Project Server. And the current version of that is 2016. So essentially what you're seeing is the feature set that would be in either Project Server 2016 or, in this case here, Project Online. So describing what you see in front of you here, we have some tiles at the top of the landing page here. These are configurable tiles that can navigate you to different functional areas of the tool. For instance, the Project Center, that's where I would navigate as perhaps a PM or a program manager to take a look at the projects that I'm managing. If I'm a resource manager, I might spend a fair amount of time taking a look at the resource center and doing things like monitoring assignments that my resources have, or taking part in what's known as the engagement workflow. So if a PM is engaging certain resources to work on their project teams, I can take a look at those requests and approve which resources would make the most sense to put on their project, things like that. Plus look at several dashboards and reports to tell what is on my team of resources plate in terms of project assignments and work assignments, what their workloads look like. Okay. And then the gray tiles that we have at the bottom here, these are tiles that any role would see when they sign into this environment. So I might not be part of a PMO, I might not be a resource manager, or I might not be a program manager or portfolio owner, but I might be one of the resources working on a project. Maybe my skill set is I'm a developer and I write code, so I'm on 3 or 4 different development projects, and I need to do things like keep tabs on the task assignments that are on my plate, or any risks or issues that are getting assigned to me. So these tiles that we have here at the bottom navigate you to different areas where a resource can keep tabs on their task assignments, any action items that are assigned to them, risks and issues that are assigned to them. Okay. Plus you'll notice when we hover on some of these tabs here, there's a little bit of information under being exposed as well. So in addition to being a navigation link, the My Tasks page will tell me without even going into the link how many tasks I have assigned, unfinished, things like that, so that when I click on it, I see no surprises when I go in there. Okay. So now we navigate back to the landing page. And from here, let me navigate into the Project Center. So those of you that have worked, at any point in time in Project Server, or if you have any exposure to Project Online, again, the Project Center is where the portfolio of projects can be accessed. Now, what you see when you navigate into the Project Center depends on your security assignments. So, I might be a project manager that owns 10 projects, in which case, I would see those 10 projects when I navigate in here. Or I might be a portfolio manager that's able to see everything. So there's different roles that govern what you see when you navigate into the Project Center. Not only that, but you also have different views that can be constructed. So for instance, if I was taking a look and doing a little bit of lifecycle management, and I wanted to focus specifically on some projects that are in the planning phase and, get all the deliverables in for those projects so that they can move forward, let's say, to execution, or what we call in here the manage phase of the project and the measurement phases, you can break down your projects in, various different ways by configuring views in here. In addition to the data that you see with the projects in the Project Center, there's also a Gantt chart on the right. So if you need to see how certain projects overlap, okay, you've got a Gantt, which you can zoom in and zoom out on, so that you can tell how much overlap there is of projects within certain phases or all of your projects overall. So, a very high-level Gantt, not a detailed breakdown structure of the work within the projects, but that we can get to by opening up the project and going to the schedule page, or opening the project up in Project Professional and taking a look at the schedule. Okay. Another thing that you can do in the Project Center, in addition to just viewing the project, or as I mentioned, clicking on a project to drill into its details. Maybe I need to take a look at some schedule details, or maybe I need to take a look at some budget details, or log a risk, an issue, upload a document, okay, like a charter or something like that. So all those exercises are available once you've accessed a project in the Project Center. But the other thing that you can do within the Project Center, again, based on your role within the application here, is load new projects into the system. Okay, so for instance, if I come over to the Project tab and I hit New on the menu here, I'm able to select among the predefined templates that have been configured in the environment. Okay, so Project Online will ship with 2 templates. I mean, one that's called Enterprise Project, which is pretty generic. You're able to upload any kind of default boilerplate work breakdown structure and have a starting schedule when you use that. The other template type you have in here is what's known as a SharePoint Task List project. That's used for very simple, usually short-term projects, but really all you need mainly is a tasks list. You don't need all the bells and whistles that go with Project Online. Anything beyond that, those would be things that you would configure, or as was mentioned earlier in the kickoff, Quick PMO is sort of a turnkey, it's an out-of-the-box application that bolts on top of Project Online, which would define some of these additional project types that you're seeing in here, like software development. So for instance, if I was to kick off a new software development project, and I could select that as a template. I could fill in whatever details are required just to get a software development project loaded into the system. So you might see a page where you're presented with 5 or 6 fields like this, relatively simple, or that template may be configured so that you have to answer 20 different fields. So whatever kind of details you need to capture when you're onboarding a project, you can configure the new project page to capture that. Okay, so that's great for loading projects, but a lot of times, a lot of organizations out there might have, in terms of intake, they might have lots of ideas that get pitched, within departments, get pitched to the PMO, ideas that get bounced within and around the organization. And it's not, generally speaking, a good practice to load those ideas in here as projects, because that can lead down the road to some extra maintenance that you have to do. So for instance, if we threw 4 or 5 new ideas in here as projects, okay, and then those ideas never really saw the light of day, we evaluated them in a little bit more detail, and we determined, yeah, you know what, I don't think that these are going to be really valuable to do. So that they would just sit in here, and somebody, typically an administrator, would have to come in and clean them up from time to time. So it's a little bit of extra maintenance that can be avoided with some other strategies that you could deploy. So when it comes to things like ideation and taking your ideas or your proposals and then converting them into projects, one strategy is to use a SharePoint list, which I have in this environment here. The SharePoint list can definitely be configured and customized to suit whatever needs you have. So in terms of capturing details on an idea, you can capture high-level or very detailed, cost-type information. You can capture specific things like, what type of methodology might we use to manage this project? What geographical regions within the company might be impacted by doing this project, or where might we need resources from in terms of geography to do this project? So when it comes to the list itself to capture ideas like this, you can control, what type of fields you have in here. And so that if I'm, going to use this as a sort of a catch-all for project ideas, okay, the fields that I see can be configured by the PMO and by the administrators that are setting up the application. So I can enter in a proposed project name. In my case here, I kept it pretty simple. Got a region. I've got an estimate for what kind of benefits and cost I think it would take to do this type of project. A lot of times I might need a supporting, maybe a spreadsheet. So I'm not just, using the finger in the wind method to determine total benefits and total costs. But since I'm using a SharePoint list here, I, of course, can attach a file to this as a supporting document. So maybe you view the spreadsheet to see what the breakdown of total cost and total benefits of this is. Okay. A risk rating, is this a regulatory requirement that we do this project or this idea if it becomes a project? And is it dependent on any other projects? So again, I can configure whatever fields are necessary here. And then once I have these ideas loaded, I could take advantage of some other SharePoint capabilities like allow voting on these items. So if we have sort of a review committee that comes in and evaluates these ideas at whatever cadence, weekly, bi-monthly, monthly, quarterly, you can use various things like the data that's in here itself. So for instance, I could create different views so that they're grouped by risk rating. And if we have a committee that's reviewing these, of course, any of the high-risk projects are going to have a certain ROI. Otherwise, it's probably not going to be a very good idea to do any of the high-risk, low-return projects in here. So you can use the data that you've collected already. Okay. In addition, you could also have a workflow implemented on this list that might do things like automate any approvals that you might need from legal, finance, or anybody else within the organization before any of these ideas might get converted into projects. And I actually have a workflow that does that. You'll notice that there is this column here called PPM Project Onboarding. So if I initiate that workflow in here, it's going to send out emails to whoever specified in the workflow. Okay, again, typically within organizations, it would be, maybe legal, regulatory, finance, departments like that. Okay, and assuming that I get enough approvals on that, the workflow could then automatically convert that idea to a project, assign a project manager, and, fill in other details. Of course, you don't have to go to that length or apply that much rigor to it. You can also just manually select one or more of these ideas in the list here and convert them into projects. So up in the ribbon here, there is a Create Projects option. And when you look at the screen here, one thing that I'll point out, or one thing that might become evident to you, is that any of the data that you've captured here in this list can be so brought along for the ride, so to speak, when you convert it into a project. So in other words, I don't have to rekey in the benefits or the cost estimates, okay, or the risk rating. I can take the values from this list, and they actually get mapped to project fields, so that there, there's no rekeying of information, no efficiencies that are lost. The other thing I can also do is I can specify which template am I using when I do convert this into a project. Okay, so if I look at this one and it's a financials integration, I mean, that sounds like software development to me. So I might select software development. Again, I'll keep my field mappings. I'll say create project. And usually within 5 to 10 seconds, there is some processing going on in the background when you create a new project. But at some point in time, you'll get a message here that says, congratulations, you've created X number of new projects. In this case, I've only selected one. So, it is not bulk creating multiple projects. Okay. But again, as I pointed out, in that case, about 15 seconds later, I get a little message. I can view the details of that. Okay. And what I have is a new project in the project center.
Hi, Aaron.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is there an option to load an Excel file with project data so you don't have to enter one each time?
You can import information from Excel to that list and use that to automate the process. Yes. Yes. That can be done.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Sure.
And I have another question. Do you want to wait for questions till the end or take them as they come?
I'll take them as they come. I mean, depending on what it is, I might have to kind of do it offline towards the end. But if it's a simple one, I can just answer it on the fly. That's fine.
Yeah. So it looks like you are using SharePoint Classic View. Can you create the project in a new SharePoint design?
If you're using the new view, then I would probably suggest that you use a workflow for that, because in the new look and feel view, so those of you, obviously whoever asked that question is pretty familiar with SharePoint. Yeah, if you're using that new look and feel within SharePoint, you're not able to access the items menu and see these buttons. So if you're using that new look and feel, now one thing you can do is just turn that off on this one list. You could have the whole entire rest of your SharePoint Online and Project Online SharePoint lists and libraries use that new look and feel. But for the purposes of this ideation list, it does rely on an item, or excuse me, a button that's on the Items tab of the ribbon. So if you're totally committed to using that new look and feel, I would suggest using a workflow then to convert those to projects.
Okay, thank you so much, Aaron.
Sure. Sure. Okay, so then I would have a new project here in the in the create phase. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I do see, okay, great, I already have a custom filter. I probably didn't turn that off from a previous demo. I was going to show you how you can add different filters here, so that even if you're using a view where I might see projects, owned by multiple people, I can see that they're already filtered down to just my projects in here. Okay, so I'll be able to drill into one of my new projects. So let me take one of my projects that's in the create phase here, right? Like a automated software installation. Okay, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And I'll walk you through some of the features that we have here within project details. Okay, so generally speaking, when you come into a brand new project, now if you use a governance workflow to manage a project through its life cycle, the first page that you would see would be this workflow status page. But workflows are optional. You do not have to use a governance workflow to manage the project through its life cycle. You could, just use the schedule and the % complete to kind of figure out where you are in its overall life cycle. Or you could have a PM or a sponsor select via a field setting, where are we? Are we in planning? Are we in initiation? Are we in, execution? But if you choose to use a governance workflow, it allows you to, to do things like enforce the collection of specific requirements and things like that. So for instance, I can see here that this project, it's a brand new project. It's still in the create phase. It's at an initiate gate. Okay, so before we can, really evaluate this thing in terms of, portfolio readiness, do we have an approved budget and stuff like that? There might be some other details that we have to capture at this initial gate. And then once I've captured those, if I submit this and, tell the workflow that I'm ready for whatever approvals may lie ahead, it can do just that. It can send out alert emails, it can schedule approval tasks for different individuals, and they can take a look at the details and see whether or not this project is ready to move into whatever the next stage gate might be. Okay. The names of the phases and the individual stage gates, those are configurable in your environment. So whether you do, if you do a lot of, say, Six Sigma methodology, lean methodology, and you have those DMAIC phases, define, measure, analyze, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or you kind of follow the standard PMBOK for waterfall projects, initiation, planning, execution, closing, or you've got hybrids of the two, you can configure whatever phase values and stage gate values you have for your different project types in here, okay? And as I kind of go down through the list here, on a new project, I can go in and do things like define any of the, project metadata or fill in the project details. So if I need to, right now this project's checked in, I'm going to turn it into edit mode. So if I need to define any of this information in here, okay, like provide a justification, so what's the justification? And this might go into the charter for this project, okay? So provide whatever justification you need to for doing this project, okay? It's a demo. I don't like to type it a lot in a demo, but, obviously you would put in whatever's relevant in there. Fill in any other field values too, so you can see here I have some required fields, okay? That's another neat thing that you can do with workflow governance. You can make certain fields that are required at certain stages within the life cycle. So before you can get beyond this initial stage gate, location might not be the world's best example here, but there might be one or several fields that you have to provide a value so that when the approver's taking a look at it, they've got all those details in there in front of them, okay? I've got a client unit which kind of acts like a department in my environment. If there are multiple portfolios within an environment, I can specify which portfolio this project might be affiliated with. Okay, so I'm going to say, all right, this would be part of our PD, our product development portfolio, okay, et cetera, et cetera. So I've got different fields that appear on this page that I could fill in. I'll go ahead and save any changes that I made on this page. I also have the ability to establish whatever budget I might have from this project. Now, here's where there are a couple ways you can go about it. If you just need very high-level estimates at this stage, you can do just that, put in again what you feel that the, total costs and total benefits of doing this project might be. And then when you receive funding from whoever, whichever BU or BUs might be sponsoring this, okay, you can enter in, either a budget value or you can break it down OpEx, CapEx. These can be further broken down. So if I needed to say, hey, we have a specific hardware budget and we have a specific training and travel budget and, operational expenses, these can be broken down and made as granular as need be. Okay. If you need to break them out over time phases, okay, we can talk about that a little bit later too. There's a couple options that we have there, okay. But again, depending on whether you want to do it as sort of top-down planning or whether you want to build a schedule estimate, put all your tasks in there, assign tasks to labor resources and cost resources and things like that, and have it calculated up and do very bottom-up planning, you can take that approach too. So either one works. You've got a lot of flexibility with the way you approach different things in here. All right. Now, since this is a brand new project, one of the things that I might do very early on, eventually I want this to get to a point where I can subject it to the portfolio analysis tool. So I can see, hey, if we do this project, is it going to have any deleterious impact on our resource pool? Do we have enough resources to do it? Is it a prohibitively expensive project relative to the amount of value that it's providing us? Okay, so from a demand management perspective, one of the things that you would do early on, okay, is you would model your resource demand for doing this project. Now, on this brand new project, I already have a work breakdown template that was associated with that software development project type. So I don't have to go in and build my schedule out from whole cloth. I have a starter template that I can just go in and tweak as need be. Okay. But let me do this. I'm going to close this. Now, in terms of editing the schedule, you can do things in the browser. Okay? I can do light schedule editing, move tasks around, set up dependencies between tasks, change task names, reorder them, things like that. But when you need to do any of the advanced functionality, particularly I'm speaking to PMs here, okay? You're going to want to use the Project Professional client. So when somebody says MS Project, I generally assume that they're talking about, Project Standard or Project Professional, the client. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the web, the web interface to viewing this enterprise project, which is stored in Project Online. But if I want to edit it, I can use a browser or I can use that MS Project Pro client. So let me close this. The reason I'm going to close it here is because if I have it checked out in the browser, I cannot edit it in Project Pro and vice versa. You can only edit it in one tool at a time, but you can edit it in either, depending upon what your needs are. So what I want to do with this project is, I want to make sure that I have a relatively realistic resource model set up in it so that when I do include it in the portfolio analysis, I can use that analysis to give me some indication on whether or not this project, is a valuable project to do. It should be part of our portfolio of in-flight projects. All right, so I will drill down here. Okay, and easy way to open up a project in Project Pro is if you locate it in the project center, and then you'll see this indicators column here, which tells me many things. I mean, it can tell me if there's any documents associated with the project, if there are any risks or issues associated with the project. That's what those different icons represent. But also, any of these things that are enterprise projects, you can click on the little Gantt icon and open it up in Project Professional, assuming that you have the Project Professional application installed on the machine that you're using. And if you're using Office 365, Project Professional, and whether or not you have it, is governed by different license types. There's 3 levels of user subscription licenses in Office 365. The lowest subscription level is what we call Project Essentials. That's what you would buy for just your general team members that are working on projects, regardless of what their role is. If I'm going to be working on a project and I need to log in to Project Online, you can purchase the Project Essentials license for them. The middle tier license is called Project Professional. So that includes the ability to log into Project Online, and it also gives you the ability to download and install Project Professional 2016 to up to 5 different machines. The top level license is called Project Premium, and you generally have a very small audience that needs that. That would be your portfolio owners, your portfolio managers, basically the people that are going to take advantage of the portfolio analysis capabilities, which I'm inching towards in the demo here. They would need that top level license. So anyway, here I am in my project schedule, okay, and kind of looking ahead at what I have planned coming up here. So beginning of June, still got a little bit of planning time for that, but just over a month. Beginning of June, I start to see some tasks in my work breakdown here where I don't have specifically named resources on them. I'm using, we're in early planning right now, so I'm using generic resources. So you can configure in your resource pool what people's roles, skill sets, things like that are. You can get very specific if need be. If you do a lot of software dev, then using something high level like developer probably wouldn't cut it. You'd probably have Java developer, .NET developer, web developer, et cetera, et cetera. So you can configure those types of settings within your environment. But what I'm looking at here is some roles that are, they're coming up in the not too distant future. I need to figure out which developer or developers might be doing this work. Okay, so one of the newer features, not newest, but newer features, it's about a year old now, but it was introduced in order to kind of help facilitate the workflow and the conversations that should be taking place between me, a project manager who's trying to figure out which developer I can use in my project, versus the resource manager who control access to those developers. So who do those developers report to? Who controls what's on their schedule and what they should be doing? Who monitors that? So we have something known as a resource engagement feature in here that you can leverage if need be, and it works something like this. So I might go over here to Resource tab and say, hey, I need to add an engagement. I want to request a certain type of resource. So I'm going to select from the drop-down here, developer, put a description in. I'm going to leave it blank for the purposes of the demo, but obviously be as descriptive as possible in this. Okay, and then try to marry up as closely as possible the start and the finish dates of when you're planning on needing those resources. You can give yourself a little bit of slack, start it a little early and end it a little bit late, but make sure you include enough in the start and the finish so that when somebody evaluates these different resources, they can commit them to your schedule for that duration of time. So I'm going to say, I'm roughly beginning of June to end of September, but I included an extra couple days towards the end of May. Then you can, as the PM, I can make a request and say, well, look, I need, roughly 600 hours of work to be done in that time period. I can use work in, hours, days, weeks, okay? I can use, different measurements there. Or I can do it kind of in full-time equivalents. So maybe I estimate that I need 3 developers for this. So if that's the case, I would put, 300% in terms of units. Whichever one I use, okay, they can be sort of fine-tuned a little bit later on when it comes to actually making those resource assignments. So I'll leave it at this. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. All right. And then what I can do is I'm going to navigate over here to something known as the resource plan. So when it comes to the portfolio analysis tool and where it's getting the resource demand from within a project, it can either come from the project schedule or it can come from this area right here, the resource plan, okay, using this engagements feature here, okay? Or if you're really getting kind of fancy with it, you can say, hey, read the schedule up to a certain point because I do have my resources planned up until beginning of June, but anything beyond beginning of June, use the engagements in the resource plan to determine, what kind of resource demand this particular project represents. Okay, so that's also an option that you have here. Nonetheless, if I navigate over to this resource plan, by virtue of what I just did here, you can see that I'm requesting a developer. Now, I haven't submitted the engagement request yet. It's in draft status, okay? But I can see that, I'm proposing that, I've got 3 FTEs for this time period in here, okay? Now, again, what I could do, that's max units. I could show proposed work, and I could instead say, you know what, we're not going to quite need 500 hours in that first month. Maybe we really only need 400 in the first month. So I can come in here and I can contour, to what I believe the true demand for these resources is, and go in and edit either the proposed work or the proposed max units. So what would happen with this, once I have this engagement request pretty much fine-tuned, is I can submit it, okay? And what will happen is it will route. So over here, there's this submit option. I can submit all or submit selected ones, okay? So, I'll go ahead and I'll say submit all of these engagements that are in here. Well, now what happens when I do that is potentially you can have email alerts turned on where the resource manager for this particular role developer, the resource manager or managers could get emails, right, where they would then be able to come into the resource center and take a look at those engagement requests and figure out, in this case, okay, let's look at all of our developers and figure out which ones have availability in the June-December timeframe. Okay, now it's a little bit, long and tedious to, log off, log on, and do that. So let me just kind of highly, describe it here. So if I switch hats to a resource manager, okay, I would, in theory, generally speaking, I would get an email. That email would hyperlink me over here to the resource center, okay, where I could then select the resource that has had the engagement submitted. So let me clear that, and I'm just going to go ahead and manually go down here and do it. I'm going to select developer. Okay. And I can take a look at whatever resource requests have been made of that developer. Take a look at, how much is being requested, whether it's units, work hours, things like that. Okay. And long story short, what I'm able to do with these is I'm able to, accept, reject, or maybe in this case, what I need to do is I need to edit this. So I'm going to go back to my resource pool here. I'm going to take a look at which developers have availability during that time frame. Okay, so, I'll select a few. So Anusha's potentially a candidate, Erlinger, Gatis, Glenn. Jason and Jessica definitely are already booked during that time period. So I can select which resources I might think fit the bill. Take a look at this capacity planning module here where I'm able to see, okay, within a certain time frame. Now let me adjust the time frame here so I'm looking at the correct time frame. All right, so if we say, hey, June 1 to end of September. Okay, I can take a look and see, hey, we're looking very good. The only one that even has any assignments whatsoever in that time frame is Erlinger. He's got 32 hours of assignments already in June. Anusha, Gatis, and Glenn have absolutely no assignments, and I can verify that by looking at the table down here below. So really, any of them would be good candidates for that. So I could go back to that resource request, and I could replace the developer with one of those two specifically named people, okay, and say, hey, this is who I approve you to use in that, okay. And then what will happen, the project manager, let me open a different project up where I've already done that. The next time the project manager opens up their project that has had one or more of their engagements approved, it's going to be pretty much right in their face here. They're going to get a little update in the ribbon that says new resources have been committed to your project. So that PM could come over here and they could take a look at which of those. So in this case, I had already submitted a request for a developer previously, and Jason was approved for that. So I can see that Jason is now committed to this project in a certain time frame in here. So in December of 2017, I'm able to use Jason for 50% of his max units, so probably 20 hours a week. So I'll go ahead and close Project Pro. and navigate back. So in terms of, from the onboarding process to now, I do have some projects in the portfolio where I'm establishing a resource demand for them. I'm managing the schedule. Okay, I'm fulfilling those initial deliverables and requirements that we have on those projects. What I can now do is sort of switch gears a little bit and talk about the next demo topic that we have. Okay, so project prioritization. So the projects that you're doing, are they moving your company closer to its strategic goals? How do I tell if that's the case? So how can I use the tool to better indicate which projects are doing just that? Okay, and how exactly are we prioritizing projects? Are we using something simple like a high, medium, low scoring value where the sponsor or the PM might select that, and then you get 99.9% of your projects that say they're high priority? Or do you use a slightly more nuanced way to capture what the overall prioritization of the project is? Okay, not only that, but also demand management itself. So tie the two together. If we do certain projects that are, let's say, right now they're still proposals. They haven't actually started execution yet, but we compare them against our in-flight projects. Does that pose any kind of resource issue, or do we have enough resources to do that? Okay, so the portfolio analysis capabilities that you have in Project Online can give you exactly that kind of insight, help you better manage your portfolio. So let me bounce back over to my environment here. And I'm going to show you, what that looks like. So from a resource demand standpoint, okay, you have already seen, how you can model demand for resources within your project. You can use a schedule, or you can use those engagements and resource plan. Okay. The other part of this thing is if I have certain projects, and right now I actually use a phase called the select phase, okay, where I'm indicating, hey, these are projects they haven't kicked off yet, but they're the ones that I do want you to evaluate. Okay. You can also score those projects against business drivers that you've defined within this platform. Okay, so how are you measuring project success? So the PMO or the administrators of this system, they can go into this area right here, this strategy area, and build a library of drivers. So let me do this. Let me open up my driver library on a separate tab so I can come back to this one and continue demoing what I'm doing. But our driver library in this particular environment has some drivers that have been configured. And they're going to allow us to measure things like, process efficiency, customer satisfaction, our ability to penetrate new markets by doing certain projects, or expand our market share in existing markets. Okay, so by taking a look at the library of drivers that we have, I'm able to specify which types of drivers are relevant to which types of projects. So for instance, if it's an HR-centric project, okay, I'm going to score it against drivers that have an HR relevance, like employee satisfaction, process improvement, stuff like that. I'm not going to rank my HR project with drivers like, how well will this project help us to expand into new markets or reduce product defects. I mean, those are not the goals of an HR project. So if we take a look at our driver library here, okay, I can see that I have about 8 drivers that have been defined in here. And here, I'll give you an example of the details and the settings of a driver. So if I was building a new driver, this is what I would have to configure. So this particular driver is called expanding into new markets and segments. So when we measure how well a given project will help you expand into new markets and segments, okay, you're able to construct it such that you fill in all these blanks down below. So you're able to put threshold values in there that are meaningful and relevant to your organization. Okay, so something that might be an extreme score in terms of expanding into new markets and segments for your organization, which might be a very large organization, could be very different than what our values are in there for a medium-sized organization. So in here, I'm saying that, look, if a project is going to help expand into the new markets and segments, okay, from 0 up to 500K, that's low market growth. If it's going to have an impact between $500,000 and $1 million, that's moderate. If it's between 1 and 3 million, that's strong. And anything above 3 million that would help us, expand into new markets, that's going to get an extreme score on that. Okay. So once I have these different drivers defined, what I can do is I can use these drivers, or you can use custom different fields as well, regular project fields, to determine how I rank the projects. Okay. So the way it works, if we are using drivers themselves. Let me go back into one of these projects that is in this selection phase. I'll use this audit tracking solution. So if I click on this project, I'm going to have this page called the strategic impact, where I can then go in and I can rank this project. So this audit tracking solution project, I can score it against the various drivers. How well is this project going to help us expand into new markets and segments? How well is this project going to help us improve customer satisfaction score, et cetera? Okay. So once I've done that, and I can even make this page be, a requirement when we're at this particular stage gate that we're in right now, this select gate. So, before you can move on, you have to fill in the details on the strategic impact. So you can bake that right into your governance workflow if you want to. Okay. But then once you've done that, okay, the projects that have that filled in, they're then candidates to have an analysis performed against them. Okay. So when you set up a portfolio analysis, now, and for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to go into one that I had just pre-configured right before this meeting, but you're going to see all the moving parts of this. You're going to see, how this works. So when I go into this DM portfolio review here, so typically this analysis would be done periodically. Some organizations do it monthly, some do it quarterly. So, the timing of it usually goes into, whatever naming convention you come with. So, maybe it's IT portfolio FY17 analysis. Okay. So when you go into here, you can select different departments, or you can leave the departments blank and choose projects, globally across the whole entire enterprise. So this essentially acts as a filtering mechanism. Okay. You pick a prioritization model if you're using drivers, such that these different prioritization models I've already configured in the environment, but they're what determines what the weight of those individual drivers are relevant to each other. So those drivers that you were looking at, expanding into new markets, improving customer sat, improving employee sat, et cetera, they do not have to be evenly weighted when you're analyzing the project. You might have certain drivers that carry a higher weight than other drivers. So you can specify that by setting up what you're looking at here. These are different prioritization models. And I'm going to use one called executive consensus, which does have the market expansion drivers. So expanding into new markets, or penetrating new markets, and increasing market share in existing markets, those are the two highest priority drivers. Then we go down through the list. Customer sat comes next, process improvement, and all the way down to employee satisfaction, which is not unimportant to us, but relatively speaking is the less important driver among those that are selected. So I pick that prioritization model. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to select which projects, are ready to be analyzed by this tool here. So obviously I want to weed out things like finished projects, closed projects, but they're done. There's no point in analyzing them anymore. But I also want to weed out the projects that are so new in their life cycle that they don't have those details filled in yet. They might not have any resource modeling established for them. They might not have the strategic impact score values entered, things like that. So you want to make sure you pick projects that are at the right stage of their life cycle. So a lot of times what you'll do is like something like this. You'll construct a view that is filtered so that you have all of the projects, basically already selected that meet the criteria for analysis, which is what I've done in this case. So in my environment here, that means 22 projects right now. So this is a combination of mostly in-flight projects, but then a small handful of projects that haven't taken flight yet, but that's why I'm using this. I want to analyze whether they're going to be able to be doable from a resource standpoint, et cetera. Okay, so I put in cost constraints, I put in any kind of resource details that I have here, and eventually what I'm able to take a look at with this is I'm able to see on this next page here, it's a matrix of each one of these projects' driver scores. Okay. And as a portfolio analyst, I am able to override these. So by committee or individually, if I'm doing this all by my lonesome, which is not usually the case, but I can override these values if I dispute them. Okay. Eventually, as I go through, what I'm able to see is I'm able to see what my top to bottom priority projects are. All right. So I can see, this e-commerce portal development had the highest score against my drivers all the way down to hub upgrade. Okay, but from here, there's no magic line in the sand here that says do everything from this point on above. But that does exist when I pivot over into my cost analysis and resource analysis. So it's going to do that based on any budget constraints that I impose on the cost page, or if we don't have enough resources to do all these projects, it's going to indicate that on the resource analysis page. So I'll step through these relatively quickly here, kind of give you a high-level idea of what you can do with this. So for instance, on this analyze cost page here, I'm able to add additional cost constraints or use the existing cost constraint that I have here to impose. Maybe I don't quite have that much budget to do these projects. So I can put a lower value in here. I can recalculate, and it's going to balance the selected portfolio of projects now. It's going to come back and tell me, okay, given the constraint that you've just imposed, you're no longer able to do all 22 projects. You're only going to be able to do X, in this case 17, so given the amount that you imposed here as a constraint. So what it's trying to do, if I can sort of bring your attention to this efficient frontier curve here, it's trying to get you as high up the y-axis, which is strategic value, as it can, given the constraint that you imposed on the x-axis, which is my total cost value here, or my budget figure here. So right now, we're still able to achieve 85% of our strategic value by doing these 17 projects, okay? Now, of course, there might be decisions that the analysis makes that you can't live with. Like, for instance, it threw out this audit tracking solution. Okay, you might say, well, you know what, we need to do that project. It's a regulatory project. So you can override any selected projects, force them out, or vice versa, take an unselected project and force it in. Okay, recalculate that, it'll rebalance. Okay, me moving that project in, it might have to move one or 2 or 3. It's definitely going to have to move something out. Okay, but in this case, I moved one in, it moves one out. So you can continue to balance this until you get what you feel are the optimum mix of projects that you should be doing. And then these ones down here that are not selected. Now, the analysis itself doesn't fundamentally do anything to these projects in terms of, canceling them or deleting them or anything like that. But you could have, again, the governance workflow consume the output of this, and it might do something like change a field value on all of these and maybe say, candidate for hold, change that value to yes. So it wouldn't immediately put it on hold. You might have to close out some work streams and stuff, but you could come back into your portfolio and you can see which projects are candidates for being put on hold because they're not delivering the value that they should be. So in terms of art of the possible, those are some things that you could do with this, right? Other stuff, you can analyze this in a couple different ways. So if I switch over to a scatter chart, you can look at this sort of, it's still scientifically, but, a little bit more, a little bit more objectively, I guess. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to avoid this quadrant down here in the lower right. That's the bad quadrant. That's the one where we have expensive projects that are low on the value axis here. Okay, so this one down here is bad. Okay, this quadrant up here is is good, where we want most of our projects. And if you hover over these bubbles, you can get the details behind them. So here's a hub upgrade that was not selected. Here is a health assessment project which was not selected. Here's one that was selected. How did this get selected if it was down here in this undesirable quadrant? Well, I can see right here, this was one of the ones that I forced in. Okay, so I'm okay with that. If I have to do that because it's a regulatory project, then okay, fine, we'll continue to do that. All right, so ultimately, you're able to, on the cost side, again, find your perfect balance of projects. You can save the different scenarios where you're imposing budgets and things like that for comparison's sake. That's all in here as well. Okay, but the other side of this coin, if you will, is when it comes to demand management, which of these projects are we actually capable of doing given the resources that we have in our resource pool? So now this depends on a few things. A, it depends on you having the resource pool configured properly, okay, with the right settings for your resources. So if somebody doesn't work 8 hours a day on project work, but in the resource pool, you do have them indicated that they're able to work 8 hours a day on project work. Well, you're not going to get meaningful information back out of this if that's the case. So you got to have things like your resource schedules, your resource utilization values, and stuff like that maintained pretty well in the resource pool. But assuming you do that, A, and B, that your schedule and resource plan estimates are relatively accurate, then you should be able to assess, based on this outcome here, whether or not you have any resource constraint issues with these projects. So right now, this is telling me, I'm glad this is a demo environment, but it's saying of the 22 projects you've selected, you really only have enough bandwidth in your resource pool to do 12 of them. And what I can start to do here is peel back the layers and figure out, okay, these not selected projects, why are they not selected? Particularly this e-commerce portal development. That's my highest priority project. But this is telling me that it's not selected, so obviously there's some resource issues with it. So what you can do is bounce into a couple different reports and screens here to peel back those layers. One of them is this requirements detail, where I can take a look. If I go in here and check this highlight deficits, I can see, okay, I have deficit in pretty much every month of this analysis, so I can scroll down and see which roles I have deficits in. Okay, so at the top, I just have a simple role analysis. Where do you have deficits and surplus of resources? But more importantly, from a project selection perspective, if I look a little further on down the page, okay, I've got, basically two buckets. I've got my not selected projects and my selected projects. Obviously, I don't care so much about the selected ones here. They're good to go. But my not selected projects, which ones have resource constraint issues and when do they fall? So for instance, here I've got a constraint issue with software engineer, okay, in the months of October and November. Okay, so October, now what you're seeing here in terms of numbers, these are FTE, full-time equivalents. So, I'm not even half of a resource short in October. I could probably just, get my pool of software engineers to, do a little overtime or something like that and get around that. But when we get to November, I'm a full 1.5 FTE short. That's going to be problematic. So if I continue to do this project, I'm definitely going to have some delivery issues when it comes to that time frame. There are not enough software engineers in the pool to handle the work that's in this e-commerce portal development project. And you can see that for various ones down here. This one also has a software engineer constraint issue. This one has a financial analyst constraint issue. Some of them have tester constraint issues down here. Here I've got manufacturing engineer. So multiple projects that have resource deficiencies, not quite enough resources in the pool to handle the load that these projects represent. Okay, so what I can do about this is a couple things. If I switch back to the Gantt chart, any of these projects that have not yet kicked off, and that is the case here. I have some in-flight projects, but I also have some that are really just being proposed at this point. What I can do with those is I can come in here and propose a new start date, maybe move them out a little bit 6 months later to try to alleviate some of those issues. So that's one thing I can do with this. Now obviously you see here I can't change the start date of all of these because some of them have already kicked off. Okay, but I can do that on certain projects. The other thing I can do is I can come over here and I can either hire full-time employees, or I can switch my options here and say, what if we go with contractors? Let's throw, say $100,000 extra dollars. Everybody has that much sitting around. But, whatever money you feel that you could come up with, okay, plug that in here, and again, recalculate and see if I was to spend additional money. Now, 100,000 might be a pretty high starting point depending on your organization, but whatever you feel is doable, plug that in as a added spend and see what it comes up with in terms of a portfolio balance. And now I've gone from 12 to 16 projects, so I can see which ones moved in. Okay, so several of them were moved in here. Okay, and the other thing I can take a look at is I can take a look at, okay, where did that $100,000 go? So if you look, we have a built-in report here called the Hired Resource Report that allows you to decipher, okay, these are the types of resources that you need to hire and during which time frame. And, if you truly can get the resources at those rates, okay, and by the way, those rates were essentially consumed from the blended rate you have on those resources in the resource pool. So if this looks feasible, then again, what I can do is I can come back here and I can use this as an assessment of, again, here's the projects that are not causing any resource issues. Here's the ones that, again, I don't necessarily need to cancel or put these on hold, but I got to, figure out what I can do about some of these projects down here to make sure we get, enough resources on them. Or maybe it's not so much putting them on hold or starting them later, but maybe I need to stretch them out a little bit further. So, okay, maybe we won't get this audit tracking solution done, by our planned delivery date of, December of this year. Maybe it has to go into, March or, second quarter of the following year, because I got to spread that work over a longer time to get around those resource constraint issues. So lots of good info that you can consume from that portfolio analysis tool. Okay. And, again, if you really want to impose a high level of rigor, you can even have the workflow, if you have workflows in your environment, consume that to determine which projects move forward, which ones don't. Okay. Now, if I can kind of switch hats and get over to a different topic here, I want to show you some of the ways that you can report on project performance and then take a look at a higher level, not just looking at an individual project, but look across multiple projects and see, hey, how are we doing with certain projects or all the projects within our portfolio? Okay, so from a BI standpoint, take a look behind some of the dashboards that we have available here. Okay, figure out, which projects are underperforming perhaps and how we get them back on track. All right. And sort of woven in with that too, we'll talk about, again, tracking project budgets, measuring your project budgets against your estimates, things like that. Okay. So, and then I'll wrap it up with, take a look at resource analysis here and what the team is doing. So from an individual project perspective, one of the things we've commonly found out there is, people spend an awful lot of time building project status reports. They'll copy details from the schedule, like upcoming milestones. They'll copy any hot button issues from either a spreadsheet, if that's where they're storing them, or if they're actually using a tool like this, the issues list or risks list. Okay, and then they'll copy things like, copy maybe the sponsor and some other details from the charter, and manually each week copy paste all that stuff into like one status report that they might deliver in PowerPoint or something like that, and that can be pretty time consuming. So what we have as part of our quick PMO tools is we have all of that stuff automated. So for example, let me switch my view here in the project center so I can get back to my grouped by PM. And here's all of my list of projects. I'm going to go in my AGH software development project. This is a project that's a little bit further along in its life cycle. It's in the manage phase. So it's at the point where it is executing. It's 33% done. I am doing risk management and, assigning issues to people if they arise, and, managing the schedule in a very detailed manner. So I'm going to click on that. And again, when I go in here, okay, I can move in and among and through these pages to do, that collection of data. So for instance, if I needed to log, there was a new risk that was raised yesterday that one of our supplier vendors, might be changing rates on some key material that we use in this. They haven't announced it yet, but, we heard that it might happen. So, I can use this risks list here to go in and maintain my list of risks, log new risks if I need to create a new list and assign it, risk and assign it to somebody. So I can log new information here. The underlying technology behind this is it just leverages a standard SharePoint list, okay? But what we have with the ability and the fact that we're storing all of this centrally here is we can combine it together with other details like hot button issues, okay, and also what my weekly project status update that I'm reporting on is. So like what are some of the key accomplishments and things like that that I'm sort of contextually entering in. Okay, I've got the ability to to store all of that right here at the project level. So when it comes time to reporting on it, so here's an example of my project status updates list where I can, whatever cadence we do for status reporting, usually it's weekly, but whatever it happens to be, I can weekly put in what my key accomplishments were within this project among the project team, what some of the upcoming tasks are, what some of the open issues or comments are, put a date here so that when you run the on-demand status report, it picks the status update from this list, okay, that's most current. And so when you go access our project status report itself, it combines all of that type of information for you together automatically. So you don't have to manually copy paste any kind of information. All right, so you'll see here in this Quick PMO Pro project status report, you've got several fields at the top, which, by the way, there is a configuration area for this page, so you can specify which fields show up here at the top. So for instance, if you didn't want to show cost, but you were okay showing things like total work, remaining work, things like that, again, you can remap the fields that are up here to display exactly what you want. Okay, I've got my different health KPIs. Okay, so what's our schedule health? What's our budget health? What's the overall health of the project? So I'm able to depict that in the status report. Okay, I've got the little area here that does read that most recent project status update entry, so I can show that on the report. And then I've got several sections that come from the schedule: upcoming milestones, tasks that are to be completed this week that are scheduled to start next week, and then any late tasks. Okay, so I can see on this particular project, glad it's a sample project, but it has several late tasks in here. So I can see that, the finish date on them is in the past already and they are not yet completed. And then down at the bottom of this, any of my risks or issues that are in the risk issue log that are still active, they also get displayed on the project status report itself. Okay. If any of our quick PMO reports, whether it's a project level one like this project status report, or if it's more of a department or portfolio report, okay, they all have export capabilities. They can be exported as images, exported as PDFs. You can print them right from the report. You can annotate them, so if I need to mark up anything on the report before I save it as a PDF, you can do that. That way these reports can be shared with you people outside the system. So you don't have to log into the system here to view the status of a project. The PM could export the project status report for you to a PDF and then email it to you if need be. Okay. So that's a way to view that kind of information at the individual project level. If we take it up a level and we want to take a look at that kind of information across maybe a program, a department, a portfolio, a geographic region, anything like that, we've got other quick PMO dashboards that can present that kind of information very rapidly, on demand, and then they can also allow you to step into the data or drill down into the details that you're looking at and figure out and assess what it is you're looking at here, and if there's any bad indicators, how can we get that back on track? So here's a good example of that. So I'll give you a couple different dashboards that they have the same capabilities in terms of charting and a table and stuff like that, but they're configured differently. So with quick PMO, one of the nice things about it is the flexibility. You can utilize our dashboard technology here, and you're able to specify what it is that's building out these charts here. So if you want to see a distribution of projects within your environment broken down by type, great. Broken down by department, great. Broken out in a bar chart by phase and by health, you've got that, and then the table down below shows the details. If you'd rather see that stuff broken down, maybe by portfolio and project manager instead, and then maybe by what type of project it is in terms of what is it delivering, what's its primary driver. So here's an example where same dashboard technology, but I've configured the parameters of it, okay, without writing any code or anything, just a simple configuration change. So now I can use this type of dashboard as part of a portfolio review process. So if I switch hats and let's say I own a specific portfolio, okay, and one of my PMs, Aaron, is running a lot of the projects within that portfolio. What I can do, I don't know if you noticed that here, but I actually clicked on the Aaron slice from the report. So here, I'll reload the page so that it has all the defaults in here. So if you click on any of the areas of the charts up top, they are all connected to each other. So it's essentially, so if I clicked on this yellow slice here for Jer, it would select all of his projects, and I would see which portfolio he's managing projects in. I would see what drivers his projects are representing and what health his projects are. So, and then the table down below would also filter down to just show me his projects. I'm going to use a different person here. I'm going to use Aaron Harkleroad. So I click on Aaron, and then automatically the table down below filters to just show the 30 projects that Aaron's running. Over here on the breakdown of health, I can see that there's 20 green, 7 yellows, and 3 reds. I can see what type of projects I'm delivering here from his. Okay, so what I might do is I might use this to assess the underperforming projects that this PM is running. So down in the table, I'm going to apply some additional filters here. I'm going to go to the overall project health. I'm going to narrow it down to just red. And again, you'll notice up top, this bar chart, all the greens and yellows went away in this because I'm only focusing on those 3 red projects down here. Okay, so what I can assess with this, now again, I can use this simply as a report. I can print this out as is. Okay, in terms of capabilities, in the table that you're looking at down below, again, there are fields that you can map into this. So what you're seeing here is, percent complete, start, finish, baseline start, baseline finish. So I can see how well my schedules are tracking, things like that, cost, actual cost, remaining cost. But again, you can choose different fields, different, whether they're schedule, cost, budget type fields, stuff like that to depict in this report. So there is a configuration for that. All right. But what you're also able to do with this is treat it as kind of like a dashboard portal where you can, again, step down into or drill down into the details of what's going on with these projects. So for instance, this Apparel ERP upgrade, why is the schedule red on that? So in this case, if I click on this schedule icon, okay, you can configure it to open on a separate tab, which is exactly what's happening here. So it's opening the schedule for that project on a different tab. And what I'm able to take a look at in this particular schedule is, you notice I'm showing a task health column here. So the way I have this environment configured is if the current finish date on the task has slipped past the baseline finish, if it's from 1 to 10 days, that's still okay. It's not great, but I'm just going to show yellow on that. But if it's slipped more than 10 days, okay, beyond the baseline finish, so for instance, this one here, my baseline finish for this date task was 2/14. My current finish on it is 5. That's slipped quite a bit. So any of the tasks within the schedule like this are going to show red on that. And then in terms of rolling up, okay, if enough of the tasks within the schedule are showing, a red task health, then the overall schedule health of the project, which is what I'm indicating here, will also go to red. And that's exactly what's happening here, okay? From a budget standpoint, here I've got this asset tracking system, which has a budget showing red as well, okay? So I can click on the hyperlink for that. So when you click on these are all configurable, by the way, but when you click on the thing that looks like a piece of paper, that opens the project status report. Okay, so one of the nice things I frequently do is I use this to open up all the status reports of my, if I'm running a program of 10 projects, I can use this to open the status reports of all 10 projects within the program. And you'll notice here they open on separate tabs. It's still rendering the status report in the background. It takes about 5 or 10 seconds. But once I have that, I can quickly bounce, and this is great in a portfolio review. I can quickly bounce from one project to the next, use the status report as a discussion point, pivot off of that and, figure out what needs to be done with any of these projects. The other thing I can do with this dashboard, you'll notice here, so again, this one project has a red indicator for budget. If I click on the name of the project, I have it configured in this particular dashboard to take me specifically to the project budget page. So what I'm able to do here is a little analysis. Up top here, these were my original estimates. So I mean, hopefully I was somewhat accurate in them, but these were just the original estimates at the beginning. Down below here, this is the budget that I was actually able, to procure for this project. So I was funded to the tune of $125,000. But then over on the right, this is my run costs. So my current labor and non-labor costs, which right now are driven by MS Project, I can see here that currently the cost of this project is $149,000. My budget overall is $125,000. So again, my indicator on this, is going red on this project. So when I look at this project in any of the dashboards, or if I look at the status report for this project, I'm able to see, the fact that this one has some budget problems. So, what can I do about that? Maybe I need to reduce scope. Maybe I need to cut some of the deliverables in there. Maybe I need to take a look at the resources I'm using and see if there are cheaper alternatives. But nonetheless, this can, point me in the direction of what's going on in that area, help me pinpoint those underperforming projects, and then give me some guidance in terms of what can be done about them. Now we have several additional dashboards, both at the project and portfolio level. So to give you kind of a another example, we use Power BI as well. So if you guys are familiar at all with Power BI, Power BI is Microsoft's business intelligence platform. So we can leverage Power BI to build reports against project online data. So here you're looking at an example of one where I'm seeing some things like, resource utilization. So of my resources, are they spending a lot of time on administrative tasks, actual project billable work, or non-billable work? So I can take a look at that. I can click in that and drill down into that information. So when I do that, I can drill down into certain time frames, and I can take a look at which projects are being worked on that I'm having resources do billable versus non-billable work. I can sort of bounce around to taking a look at this by a project level. So instead of focusing on individual resources, which projects are consuming my resources? I can take a look at resource rate information in here. So, we do have customers that use this, and it might integrate with their billing system or even act as their billing system. So Power BI can definitely be leveraged to, report and provide insights on project portfolio performance. So if I navigate back to my project online landing page, so I'm at a quarter after here. I've got the final sort of demo topic, which will probably leave us about 5 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if I go back to the slides here, the last area that I haven't really touched upon, so I have switched hats between a project manager and a resource manager a little bit already to talk about the engagement process. When you were looking at the portfolio dashboard a minute ago, I sort of mentioned that as a portfolio owner, perhaps, or a program manager, I might use some of those dashboards to work with my PMs to assess the health and performance of their projects. Okay. So lastly here, kind of switching back over to the resource manager role. If I want to take a look in this tool and, kind of have an insight on what my team is doing, what they're working on currently, I can use some of the quick PMO reports and some other out-of-the-box reports to make that assessment. So bounce over to the environment here. So in Project Online, as I pointed out earlier, I've got some of these green tiles over here that can allow me to interpret what's going on with my resource team or what's going on with the different resources in my environment. So I'll start with kind of a purely tactical one. If I need to keep tabs of what the people within my department or on my team are doing day in, day out, from week to week, month to month, I can use this resource schedules dashboard to do that. So I can specify the time frame that I'm looking at here. So in this case, the last time I launched this, I was looking from April 23rd, which is a couple days ago, to May 20th. So, roughly the next 4 weeks. And then you can select the resources that you want by role, by their reporting location, by their department. You can use any of these parameters here to take a look at the resources that you want to view. I'm going to select software engineers that I manage. Solution architects, and let's say I also manage a pool of developers. Okay, so I will pick those 3. Okay, and when I click the filter button, what I'm able to take a look at on the page then is I'm able to take a look at the work assignments that these resources have from different projects. I can zoom out on this and see a little bit better scale too. And in addition to that, I have color-coded entries in here. So if I have certain resources like Jonas here, okay, who's got a lot of red on their row, that's indicating an over-allocation of that resource. Okay, so I need to get with this payroll system upgrade project's PM, because I can see here that Jonas right now has 16 hours of work assigned for all of these days in here, and that's certainly not going to cut it. He's not expected to do double time in those days. So as a resource manager, I can see if there are any problematic project assignments out there, which would then allow me to, again, I could click directly from here to the payroll system upgrade to see who's running that project if I don't already know, okay, and open up a line of communication to get Jonas leveled out a little bit better, maybe get a replacement for him on it, or just get another resource to balance the load, or stretch his work out a little further. Okay, so from the purely tactical of what's going on day to day, we've got resource reports for that. And then to sort of jump to the other end of the spectrum and talk about strategic planning, okay, we also have strategic planning reports where we can take a look at an individual resource level or at a role level. So if you think back, imagine the portfolio analysis that I did a little bit ago. One of the outputs of it at the very end was that we were able to assess any project that present resource constraint issues. So we can do the same thing here without having to step all the way through a portfolio analysis, which can take some time, by running the role capacity report. So the role capacity report that we have here, again, I'm able to select one or more roles. So let's say a scenario here is that we are considering doing some new projects to start at the beginning of next month. So, pretty soon, but beginning of May, okay? And we know that in the first couple months of execution, we're going to need a fair amount of analyst work and a fair amount of developer work going into them. So we want to take a look at, from beginning of May to end of June, how much bandwidth do we have within those 2 resource pools? So I can use this role capacity analysis to help guide my assessment of, do we have bandwidth to do some additional projects, take on new work streams in the beginning of May, end of June. And in this case, okay, I'm able to see here that, okay, analysts have quite a lot of work on their plate for the month of May in terms of hours, developers much less. But in either case, this black line up here represents capacity. We're nowhere near capacity for the month. So even if I come over here and I weed out the analyst, click on it over on the right, remove it from the legend. Actually, I wanted to do the opposite of that, leave analyst and weed out developer. So obviously, I have way more FTEs of analysts in my resource pool than I do developer. So if 2,300 hours in the month of May really only represents, it looks like about 50% capacity. And I can tell by drilling down into the table below, I was close. We're at 49.22% utilization in that month. And then in June, it drops way down to 16.9. So absolutely, maybe starting them in May might be a bit much, but if we start in June, we've got plenty of bandwidth, both for analysts and developers in that time frame. So I could use a report like this to assess from a strategic type perspective whether or not taking on new work streams would be feasible in a given time frame. Okay. So if I bounce back to the slide, that's kind of it in terms of the technical demo that I have planned. Just a few more slides here to sort of round out, though. If you keep an eye on our website, vibrantfusion.com/events. You're able to keep track of any upcoming events we have. And one that's planned, I'm not sure if it's been scheduled yet, but one that's planned is for any of you that use Dynamics in Office 365. So the CRM module for that, Customer Relationship Manager, if you do sort of sales-based projects and you need to manage projects from opportunity to, all the way out through delivery, okay? Lead, opportunity to delivery. There is a project service automation feature within Dynamics. So basically using Dynamics as a project management tool. And we're going to, we're going to provide a demonstration on how that can be done in an upcoming event. Okay, so again, you'll be able to see if you use Dynamics or if you're evaluating Dynamics, okay, how that might help with project management. Okay, so again, you saw in the demo today quite a bit of the quick PMO functionality. Okay, we do have other apps that you didn't really see in this demo, but we have other events coming up for them. So if you do a lot of Scrum methodology or Agile management of projects in Project Online, okay, we have an app that can help assist with that. Okay, again, I mentioned that we use Power BI for a lot of our reporting. If you have a lot of data in SharePoint lists, whether it's project related or not, but you've got lots of information that's in SharePoint lists and you want to build business intelligence on top of that, build dashboards and build reports, we have a self-serve BI tool called Canvas, which could be used to join data you see here from Project Online, Project Server, SharePoint into single unified dashboards. Okay, so another thing that we have coming up in some additional events. Okay. And then again, it kind of made mention of our support services and the workshops that we do. So at this time, I will see if anybody remaining on the call. I know we had a few that dropped. We're getting pretty close to the cutoff point here. But if anyone else has any questions that they have, you could either put them in the chat window or speak them aloud. I'll stay online here for an extra couple minutes. If you don't have any questions, I mean, you are free to drop. I do want to thank everybody for participating today and joining us. There will be a link going out where you can take a look at this recording if you have anybody else that you want to see this, and then also an evaluation form to fill in. Oh, so I got one here. Do reports and dashboards have the ability to view on mobile devices? Yes. So, our reports are visible on, primarily tablets, so things like iPads, Galaxy Tabs, stuff like that. But that said, even on phones, so particularly those that are constructed in Power BI, there is a Power BI application in the App Store for iOS and for Android. So yeah, those reports can most definitely be consumed on mobile devices.
Hi, Aaron. In the prioritization process, when you move the project start date, do the engagements and the tasks get moved as well, or do you have to go in there and update them separately?
So if there were engagements in there, yeah, I mean, moving them in that analysis does not fundamentally make a change to the schedule itself. That's basically just telling you from an analysis perspective, if you were to do this, say 6 months later, hey, it would fit in the mix. You would manually then, unfortunately, but you would manually have to go back to that schedule and adjust, tasks or adjust any of the engagement requests that have been made.
And then in that prioritization process, do you typically have the admin and non-project work time accounted for in a project, or is that stripped out based off the resource?
So
how
yes.
do most people handle that?
So if you want the how do most people do it, it kind of depends on how much contouring they need of the resources. If the resources are pretty static in that, let's say that, look, in general, they do about 50% service desk type stuff, and so they're available about 50% for project work. If that's the case, you can just configure the resource pool settings to model that. But if it's sort of all over the place, like 1 month they might not be available at all because they're doing maintenance work full time, and then the following month they might be available 75%, et cetera, that's very tough to do with just setting resource attributes. So what we generally recommend then is you do exactly what you just described, create like an admin project or a keep the lights on project, or projects plural, and you can model their consumption in those admin projects. And then what you would need to do is you would need to make sure that those projects are included in your analysis so that the consumption from them is legitimate consumption.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. Are we able to use Project Online or Project Server if we have Office 2013? Well, okay, so let me answer that in 2 ways. As it pertains to Project Professional, they've delayed it a couple times, but at some point you're going to have to upgrade to Project Professional 2016 in order to connect to Project Online. At this point in time, and I think maybe for the next couple of months still, you can use 2013 and 2016. Okay. For the rest of the Office suite, so, if you need to collaborate on documents that are in Project Online, you need Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all that good stuff, Office 2013 is fine for that. You don't need the 2016 version of Office for Project Online. But again, the caveat there is when it comes to Project Professional, which is part of MS Office, at some point in the not too distant future, that version is going to have to be 2016 for your users. But again, keep in mind, if you do this, for the people that are PMs within your organization, if you buy that middle tier license for them, the Project Pro license for Project Online, that gives them the ability to, download and install Project Pro. So, you don't have to worry about CALs, client access licenses for Project or anything like that. So that can sort of ease that deployment and rollout a bit for you.
Had another one for you, Aaron. You mentioned for the costs, you can do either top-down or bottom-up calculation. For benefits, it seems like there's mostly just top-down via strategic drivers. Can you do bottom-up based off benefits, or like based off a go-live date in the schedule, or different phases of a project, or anything like that?
I mean, there's nothing really native in the tool right now, and that's not something that we've added on in our Quick PMO tool set. We've heard it enough that I think it's on our roadmap at some point. But right now at this point in time, what I would say is most people would do things like have an Excel document stored in the project site for that, where they could go view that kind of information. Not something that's tied directly into the data set for the project itself that you would report on, but it's in here in the form of maybe Excel or something, or maybe a SharePoint list even.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, well, once again, so Katie and Lisa, if you're still listening, thanks for joining in on this. We'll be sending that link out shortly. Again, so if anybody else would want to view the recording here, or if you missed any pieces of it and you want to refresh a little later, and then plus also the eval form for this. So we would greatly appreciate any kind of feedback that we can get on this. So again, thanks everyone. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.